Fine, I faked a chronic illness to get my boyfriend's attention. But he's the one who pushed me to it. Have you ever tried to have a conversation with a wall? No, I'm serious. A literal, physical wall. Because for the last year, that's what my life with Sawyer felt like. My ex-boyfriend, God, it feels weird saying that, was a master of passive aggression. Not the amateur kind, with sarcastic comments. He was a professional, a black belt in the art of making you feel completely insane through sheer, suffocating silence. Living with him wasn't living, it was interpreting. Every short, one-word text, "K, fine, sure," was a puzzle I had to decode. Every sigh he let out while I was talking wasn't just a sigh. It was a carefully calibrated explosion of unspoken disappointment that would hang in the air for hours. Our beautiful apartment, the one we were so excited to decorate, stopped being a home. It became a tense, quiet library where the only book was Sawyer's Mood, and I was desperately trying to read the title from across the room. It was maddening. I would ask him what was wrong, and he'd just shake his head, look at his phone, and mutter, "Nothing, I'm fine." But he wasn't fine. The way he'd meticulously clean only his side of the kitchen counter or forget to pick up the milk I'd asked for told me everything I needed to know. He built a wall of silence around himself, brick by brick, and it made me feel completely invisible. I'd rather have a screaming match every single night than endure that deafening quiet. At least a fight is a conversation. This was a slow, agonizing erasure. So, I need you to understand that before you judge me. I need you to understand that he pushed me. He's the one who turned our home into a silent war zone. I just decided to use a different weapon. I have to be fair. It wasn't always like this. In the beginning, Sawyer's quiet nature was what drew me in. He was calm, a steady presence in a world that felt chaotic. But what I once saw as calm, I now understand was avoidance. And that avoidance triggered something ugly in me, something I thought I had buried. My last boyfriend before Sawyer was a different kind of monster. He used the silent treatment as a weapon of choice. If I did something he didn't like, he wouldn't yell. He would just stop talking to me for days. The silence wasn't empty, it was full of judgment, a constant, humming reminder that I had failed, that I was unworthy of his words. It broke me. I told Sawyer about this. On one of our first dates, I laid it all out, wanting him to know the deepest parts of my fear. I told him that being ignored felt like dying. He held my hand across the table and promised he would never, ever do that to me. For a while, he didn't. But slowly, over the last year, the silence crept back in. It wasn't the same calculated punishment as before, but it felt the same. It scraped against that same old wound. And it all came to a head on our 3rd anniversary. We had reservations at this beautiful, expensive restaurant we'd been talking about for months. I spent 2 hours getting ready. I felt beautiful, but the moment I saw him, I knew something was wrong. He'd had a bad day at work, and the storm cloud was hovering right over his head. Let me paint you a picture of that dinner. Me, trying desperately to salvage the evening, talking about anything and everything to fill the oppressive silence. Him staring at his plate, pushing a piece of asparagus around with his fork, giving me one-word answers. The final straw came when I reached for his hand. "Sawyer, please," I whispered. "Talk to me. What's going on?" He pulled his hand away, not aggressively, but with a finality that shattered me. He picked up his phone and started scrolling, finally looking up with dead eyes to say the 6 words that lit the fuse. "I'm fine, you have fun." Sitting there, in my new dress, feeling the eyes of other couples on us, I had never felt so foolish or so utterly alone. It wasn't just sadness anymore. It was a cold, hard fury. I realized in that moment that my words meant nothing to him. My feelings were an inconvenience. If I was going to get through that wall he'd built, I couldn't use a hammer. I needed a bomb. Something he couldn't ignore, something that would force him to see me. The idea came to me a few days later, fully formed, like a devil whispering in my ear. If my emotional pain was invisible to him, then I would have to create a pain he could see. A physical one. It wasn't a snap decision. It was a doctoral thesis in deceit. My nights were spent under the blue light of my phone's screen. My search history, a testament to my descent. Symptoms of chronic fatigue, undiagnosable autoimmune disorders. What does nerve pain feel like? I became a scholar of sickness, curating the perfect collection of subjective symptoms that no doctor could definitively disprove. Dizziness upon standing, a deep migratory ache in my joints, crushing fatigue, brain fog. It was a prison made of feelings, and I was about to hand him the key. The first performance was small. A persistent headache rubbing my temples whenever he was in the room. He actually looked up from his laptop. "You okay?" he asked. The words were a drop of water on a parched tongue. A week later, I executed my first major set piece. Getting out of bed on a Saturday morning, I let my legs give way, catching myself on the nightstand with a sharp, theatrical gasp. Sawyer was out of bed in a second, his face a mask of pure alarm. "Peyton, oh my God, what is it? Are you in pain?" I leaned on him, my voice a practiced, shaky whisper. "I don't know, I got so dizzy." He guided me back to the bed, his hands gentle, his eyes wide with a fear I hadn't seen in years. That was the moment the guilt should have consumed me, but all I felt was a tidal wave of relief. He canceled his plans. He spent the entire day catering to me. The wall of silence had not just crumbled, it had been obliterated by a flood of pure, uncut concern. The performance became my life. I learned how to subtly wince when standing up. I'd occasionally lose my grip and drop a coffee mug, shattering it on the floor, then apologize profusely for being so clumsy. I'd trail off mid-sentence, blaming the brain fog. I even started a fake journal of symptoms, leaving it where he might find it. And Sawyer, my quiet, distant Sawyer, transformed into the most attentive caregiver imaginable. He started a binder, a 3-ring binder with tabs, labeled Peyton's Health. It was filled with printouts from WebMD and the Mayo Clinic. He started turning down after-work drinks with his colleagues to come straight home and cook me anti-inflammatory meals. One night, he was rubbing my feet, his face etched with worry. "I'm just so scared," he said, his voice thick. "I feel so helpless." The words "I'm fine, I made it all up" were right there on the tip of my tongue. A wave of shame so powerful it made me nauseous washed over me. But then I looked at his face, so open, so completely focused on me, and I swallowed them down. The truth would bring back the wall. The lie kept him here like this with me. The choice felt sickeningly easy. I wasn't just a liar anymore. I was the director, writer, and star of a one-woman show designed to trap an audience of one. And I convinced myself it was a masterpiece. The end came not with a bang, but with a click. The click of a laptop trackpad. I had gotten careless, high on my own success. I'd been messaging my best friend, Dana, while Sawyer was in the shower. I was bragging, telling her in lurid detail how Sawyer was now the perfect boyfriend, how he'd made me a 3-course meal because I was having a low-energy day. I typed the sentence that would end my world. "Honestly, the Academy owes me an Oscar for this. He's so wrapped around my little finger it's almost sad." I must have gotten up to get a glass of water and left the chat window open. A stupid, arrogant mistake. He didn't say anything when he came out of the bathroom. He didn't say anything while we ate dinner, the very meal I had just been mocking. The silence was back, but it was different. This wasn't the passive-aggressive, pouty silence I knew. This was something else. It was heavy, like a shroud. It felt like grief. I, in my infinite stupidity, misinterpreted it. I reached across the table and put my hand on his. "Hey," I said softly, my voice full of fake concern. "Is my condition stressing you out? You seem so distant tonight." He just looked at me. His eyes, which for weeks had been filled with worry and love, were now completely empty. It was like looking into a void. He finished his meal, stood up, and began clearing the plates without a word. The tension was suffocating. I followed him into the living room, my heart starting to pound a frantic, guilty rhythm against my ribs. He sat on the couch, not looking at me, but at the blank television screen. He waited until I sat down opposite him. Then he finally spoke. His voice was unnervingly calm, almost a whisper. "I saw your messages with Dana, Peyton." The blood drained from my face. My carefully constructed world tilted on its axis. What? What are you talking about?" I tried to sound confused, indignant, but my voice came out as a pathetic squeak. "The one where you said the Academy owes you an Oscar," he continued, his voice flat, devoid of any emotion. "The one where you said it was almost sad how wrapped around my finger I was. He recited my own words back to me, and they sounded vile, monstrous. He finally turned to look at me, and the sheer, unadulterated disappointment in his eyes was a physical blow. It hurt more than any scream ever could. "I know I'm not perfect," he said, his voice starting to crack just a little. "I know I shut down. I know I'm terrible at talking about my feelings. I avoid conflict. I do all the things you hate. I know that. But I was trying. I swear to God, Peyton, I was trying, but it was never enough for you." He shook his head slowly. "But what I am not is stupid. And I am not a toy for you to manipulate. You didn't just lie to me. You weaponized my love for you. You took my deepest fear, the fear of you being hurt or sick, and you turned it into a puppet show where I was the dancing fool. You didn't do this to fix us. You did this to win." He stood up. "We're done. I can't even look at you right now." And with that, he walked into the bedroom, packed a bag, and left. I didn't say a word. I couldn't. I just sat there on the couch, drowning in a silence that was finally terrifyingly real. He was gone, just like that. No yelling, no final fight, just the quiet click of the front door closing. For the first few hours, my brain couldn't process it. I was in a state of shock. Then the anger kicked in, a familiar, comforting rage. How dare he? How dare he just walk out after everything? He was the one who started it, with his silences and his emotional unavailability. I was just reacting, wasn't I? The next morning, I did what I always do when I need validation. I called our mutual friend, Jess. I launched into my carefully rehearsed victim narrative, painting Sawyer as the cold, unfeeling villain and myself as the desperate woman pushed to extremes. I told her everything, framing my illness scam as a tragic, misguided attempt to get him to open up. I expected sympathy. I expected her to say, "Oh, Peyton, that's awful." He had no right. Instead, there was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Peyton," she finally said, and her tone was one I'd never heard from her before. It was cautious and laced with a pity that made my skin crawl. "I love you, you know that, and Sawyer's communication skills are not great. We all know that. But what you did, that's not a cry for help. That's psychological warfare." But he pushed me to it. I insisted, my voice rising. "No," she said, her voice firm now. "He didn't. He's a bad communicator. You're a manipulator. Those two things aren't the same. You didn't want to solve a problem, you wanted to control him. You lied, you faked a serious illness, and you bragged about it. What did you think was going to happen? You can't build a relationship on a foundation of lies and expect it to survive. I'm sorry, but you're on your own with this one. I can't defend it." Her words were like a bucket of ice water. For the first time, a crack appeared in my fortress of self-righteousness. Was she right? Was I the villain? The thought was so terrifying I couldn't hold on to it. I spent the next few days in a haze of denial, cleaning the apartment with a frantic energy, trying to scrub away the lingering silence. It was while I was clearing out his bedside table, throwing his things into a cardboard box with angry, jerky movements, that I found it. Tucked inside a book he was reading was a folded-up piece of paper. It wasn't a note or a letter. It was a receipt. A receipt from a local counseling center, dated 2 weeks ago. It was a prepayment for a couples communication workshop. My name and his were printed right there at the top. I sank to the floor, the receipt clutched in my hand. He hadn't just been shutting down. He hadn't just been ignoring the problem. While I was busy becoming an expert on fake diseases, he was quietly, clumsily, trying to find a real cure. He was trying to learn my language, and I had been too busy screaming in my own to listen. The weight of what I had done finally hit me, and it was crushing. It's been 3 weeks. 24 days. The silence in the apartment has become a physical thing, a heavy blanket that smothers every sound. Every creak of the floorboards is a ghost. The dent in the right cushion of the sofa, the one that perfectly fit the shape of him, seems to deepen every day. I called my friend Amy last night, desperate to fill the suffocating quiet with anything other than my own spiraling thoughts. I heard myself using this bright, brittle voice I didn't recognize. "Honestly, I'm amazing," I chirped, pacing a frantic path on the living room rug. This whole thing was a blessing in disguise, you know. It's like this massive weight has been lifted. I'm thinking of getting bangs. Maybe I'll finally take that pottery class. I even let out a little tinkling laugh that sounded completely alien in the silent room. He was a project, not a partner. I'm so relieved it's over. I need someone who's emotionally available, not a man-child I have to trick into having a conversation. But while I was spinning this fantasy of my fabulous new life, my free hand was on autopilot. It dove into the pocket of my jeans, my fingers searching for the familiar, worn texture. The receipt. I've been carrying it with me everywhere, a constant, punishing reminder. I pulled it out as I continued to lie to Amy, my thumb tracing the crease marks until the paper was soft and fragile, like ancient cloth. The ink was starting to bleed from the moisture of my hand. Couples communication workshop. Yeah, I might even get back on the app soon, I said, my eyes fixed on the two names printed in neat, impersonal font. A project he was starting for us. While I was telling Amy how I was so over needing to fix a man, I was staring at the proof that he had been trying to fix himself. For me, I finally ended the call, promising we'd get drinks, and I'd tell her all about my hot single girl adventures. The moment I hit the red button, the fake smile slid off my face like a mask. My shoulders slumped. The bright, empowered woman from the phone call vanished, leaving a hollowed-out shell in her place. I sank onto the sofa, into his empty spot, the silence rushing back in, louder than ever. I hadn't won. I had torched the entire field so he couldn't have it, only to realize I was standing in the middle of the ashes, completely alone, clutching the receipt for a fire extinguisher I never gave him the chance to use.